Hello and welcome. My name is Danielle Forrest. I'm an alien romance author and YouTuber, and today I'm going to be reading episode 19 of Fated Mates the Drakoan, which is my alien romance serial. It is titled Returning to the Team. Now, of note in this specific situation, I am going to be doing things a little differently today. So, today's episode has a spicy bit to it, which I'm going to be excluding from the public YouTube video. So, my plan is to do this live stream with a slightly censored version that doesn't include some of the spicy bits at the end. And then I'm going to finish recording the last little bit, the part that I'm going to be excluding from this public video, to share with um, my interstellar crew on Ream as a 18 plus video. So just because it is a bit spicy, it's a bit explicit, and the last time I did something marked as 18 plus, I got 0 views. So there's really no point in me doing that because YouTube is just not going to show it to anyone. Um, so we're going to do it that way. And I will kind of paraphrase what happens in the last bit. I'll kind of go over it a little bit, but not going to go into any detail necessarily because YouTube doesn't like that. Let's be real. And like honestly, there's content creators that don't even go into anywhere near as much detail as I do, and they get hit with all sorts of strikes and weird shit all the time. So I already curse too much for my own good, so we're going to try to keep things as YouTube friendly as possible. All right, let's get started with it. Jess felt a little sad as she hugged her friends goodbye. This time was different. This time she wasn't slinking off into the night. But in a way, that made it worse. Her chest felt tight, and she was afraid she might cry. I never cry. I'm not going to cry. When she pulled back, she forced a smile on her face, and before she knew it, she was outside. Her fingers intertwined with Davin's as Van took the lead in front of them. Are you sure about this? Davin asked as he squeezed her hand gently before relaxing it. She looked over at him and nodded. I am. It feels monumental for some weird reason, but I'm taking some huge step, and there's no turning back. But I'm okay with it. A huge step. Sorry. Editing. Good. And you'll keep me safe. It wasn't a question. I will, no matter what. She nodded. So, what do we do now? Well, I'm not sure. We introduce you to the rest of the team, of course, but after that, I'm not sure. Van has the details on the most recent interactions with Earth forces. Jess nodded. Scotty mentioned trying to get the power back up. Van had seemed intrigued. Do you think that'll become part of the plan? Jess pressed into his arm as they walked, which was awkward. But he kind of liked it. Or she kind of liked it. It brought her back to high school. Not at the moment, no. I'm sure it will eventually, but our plan has been and continues to be reestablishing contact. This isn't our planet, our home. We don't have authority here. This is a path forward we agreed on with human military leaders. We are supporting them. Jess nodded, though she wasn't sure if Davin could see it. So, Scotty, yes, you two seem close. Jess smiled. Yeah, I'm closer to him than anyone else in the house. But then it occurred to her that maybe he thought something else was going on, something romantic. She jerked away, alarm rushing through her. They both stopped. We're just friends, though. Nothing more. Scotty is a diehard fan of Dick. A diehard fan of Dick? Jess nodded her head vigorously. Yes. Scotty is 1000% gay, Davin. She smirked, leaning in. In fact, if you'll recall, he seemed more than a little enamored with Van back there. Van? He jerked his head to the side, watching as Van continued forward, not yet realizing they'd stopped. Then he remembered the conversation they'd had earlier, with Scotty calling Van names like Spock and Boo. And yes, he'd clearly seen that there'd been some sort of spark in Scotty's eye, though he doubted the feeling was mutual. Jess nodded. Van. Scotty has always had a thing for serious types. Like I said, he has the biggest crush on Spock, and that character is like the epitome of serious. I can't quite picture it. He tried to imagine them together, his mind conjuring Scotty fawning over Van, and Van just standing there looking bewildered. Jess pulled back, shrugging. I'll admit, Scotty does have a tendency to come off as a bit of a goofball at first. He's playful and loves his games and fandoms, but he's no slouch. He works as hard as he plays. What's he do? He's an electrical engineer, though I'm not sure exactly what he does. Some sort of design work, I think. Jess frowned, but really, Scotty rarely ever talked about work in any detail. And in the rare instances he brought work home, he was more grumbling about the absurdly heavy laptop he had to lug with him than any projects themselves. Do you think he could be of help with getting the power back up? They started moving again. Maybe? I hadn't really thought about it. He doesn't have any connections to the power companies, but he might be more familiar with the technology than most. You'd have to ask him. He nodded, the motion visible in her periphery. Jess thought about it, about what it might take to get the power back up. He'd said it wasn't part of the plan yet, but everything else just seemed so nebulous, giving her nothing to hold on to focus on, to stress over. How many people are on your team? She said, scrambling for a topic that wasn't likely to stress her out. He looked down at her. Including me and Van? 6. She frowned. It wasn't a tiny team necessarily, but would it be enough? She wouldn't say she necessarily understood electricity and electrical grids that much, but power failures tended to be all-encompassing. And even if they could get the power plants up and running again, would it matter? What if there were parts of the grid that were damaged? Parts that couldn't transmit or store electricity? The enormity of the potential problem suddenly overwhelmed her, and she pushed it out of her mind, instead focusing on their surroundings. Everything looked a little different in daylight, so it took her brain a moment to connect the dots. But she recognized these little cookie-cutter houses with too many cars out front. We're close. She picked up the pace with a smile, excited to reach their destination. Slightly behind her, Davin chuckled, but she didn't care. Letting him follow as he may, she jogged to catch up with Van, who she now saw turning toward the little park where they'd landed the shuttle. Not even a minute later, she had a view of the shuttle itself. She was still halfway across the lawn when 4 people, all with varying shades of red scales, poured out of the back, greeting Van. They seemed like a jovial enough bunch, and she smiled, excited to meet them. These people are important to him. Then they all seemed to shift as one, and she froze. A hand touched the small of her back, and Davin's voice whispered in her ear, "Come on, let me introduce you." Anxious butterflies dive-bombed in her stomach, but she nodded and let him lead her forward. What were they thinking? Were they going to like her? Would they hate her? Shit. Maybe this was a bad idea. Everyone, this is Jess, my mate. Jess looked up, surprised at the warmth and pride in Davin's voice. Their relationship so far had been built on passion and compulsion more than anything else, so hearing the softness in his voice was a surprise. He was smiling down at her, and he leaned down, nuzzling her hair. Jess smiled, shaking her head. Mate? One of them said, sounding incredulous. Damn, why not me? Another said, the words coming from the only female in the group. Congratulations? The last one only laughed. Jess, this is Eric, Grace, Lane, and Heath, Davin said, pointing at each in the order they'd spoken. Pleasure, she said, nodding and greeting. What's going on here, Commander? Heath said, though there was a slight smile on his face, and a twinkle in his eye, like he was looking for a joke to make. Davin took a deep breath but didn't immediately speak up. Instead, Van did the talking. Jess will be coming with us for the foreseeable future. We'll be switching to protection detail protocols moving forward. Why? Eric crossed his arms in front of him as a snide look crossed his face. Behind him, his tail whipped back and forth agitatedly. Davin flinched and Jess reached out, squeezing his hand reassuringly. Because this is new, she said. And until we've got a better handle on things, this is the best plan we've got. Grace smirked, the expression quickly stretching into a massive grin. Oh, somebody's got it bad. Davin flinched again, and Jess sighed quietly. Did they have to give him hell for it? That's enough, Van said, drawing everyone's attention. Be ready to move out in 15 minutes. Jess, come with me. She nodded, following all of them up the ramp. They each stopped almost immediately upon entering and started pulling stuff off the walls. Van turned to her with something like a black vest in his hands. Put this on. She reached out and grabbed it. Fuck! It was heavy, dragging her down almost immediately. It reminded her of the leaded aprons they used for x-rays, though maybe not quite that heavy. Still, as she slipped her arms through and pulled it over her shoulders, she groaned, not looking forward to wearing it for any length of time. As soon as it was weighing her down, Davin came before her and started working at the front of it, shutting the opening with a series of deft movements. There, you're perfect, he said before turning to the wall and donning his own gear. Jess turned to Van. Where are we going? Is it a long walk? It will be, but first we have to fly in close. It's not close? He shook his head. Don't worry. We'll be at the next landing site fairly shortly. Jess nodded, then followed them through the shuttle. The first room emptied into a hallway with several doors, all of which were closed. When the hallway opened up into another open area, she froze, immediately seeing a problem. There's only 6 seats. Davin looked down at her and was that a blush? She wasn't sure. It was really hard to tell with scales, but they did look like they'd gotten darker. Van turned around. You'll have to sit with Davin. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I hadn't thought of that concern when we come up with this plan. I apologize, Jess. He turned to someone, Heath, who had just sat in one of the seats directly next to the window. Be sure to be careful as the shuttle is currently over capacity. Yes, sir. It took no time for each of them to take their seats. Davin buckled in, then reached his arms out to her. She sat down, letting his hands curl around her waist. Unfortunately, this wasn't like sitting on his lap in her living room. For one, her options were limited. She had to sit with her back flush to his front, which meant balancing on his thighs instead of across them. And yet, the longer she sat there, the more his heat permeated her, relaxing her muscles. And the way his fingertips traced little circles on her stomach wasn't bad either. Then the shuttle rumbled to life and she slipped, now straddling one of his thighs. It was uncomfortable, her outer thigh now pressing hard into the armrest, but she almost didn't care because the engine noise was vibrating straight through her, leaving her a bit breathless. Oh, this is embarrassing. But at least most of the team had their backs to her. They didn't get to see the way her cheeks had just flooded with heat. Then the shuttle took off, and she grunted as the force ground her against his leg. Damn, should have worn jeans for this. The stretchy fabric of her yoga pants was just a bit too accommodating. And as she tried to fight against the force of takeoff, tried to get herself properly back on Davin's lap, she just managed to rub herself on him more. And we're going to cut things out there. So it gets kind of frisky. The two of them forgetting where they are and having some fun together. And let's see. So we're going to skip to the very end of the scene. After all the friskiness is kind of past. Gradually, her breathing slowed and awareness trickled in. She opened her eyes as the chill air pressed in on her heated skin, which was when it finally hit her. Shit, we're not alone. 4 sets of eyes were staring back at them. Oh, fuck. I just let Davin get me off in front of his entire crew. Okay, So that was my attempt to curb some of the spicier bits. Let me know how you think that worked. This was not something I had originally planned when I started doing this series on YouTube. So if you think it worked pretty well, let me know in the comments or chat, etc. If not, let me know how I could do better. Um, that's all I've got for now. If you want to see um, want to listen or watch the spicier version that's going to go up on Ream, it'll have a link on Ream. Um, you can check it out there. It'll be all industrial or crew members will have access. So smut lever and up. um, and I plan on working on that today. So it's ideally it should at least be available either today or tomorrow is the goal. I'm gonna do it fairly similarly to the way I handle these live streams where it's not like edited to hell and back, but there is that. Additionally, if you want to read ahead, you can do so on Ream. Followers get one episode ahead, and um, serial lovers and up get five episodes ahead at the moment. That's all I have for today. Thank you for being here. If you want to connect with me in other places, consider checking out the stuff in the comment in the description of the video. Not, I'm just struggling right now. It's also where you can find links to all my stories online. If you like the video, considering giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. And that's all I have for today. And I will try to put some links here for anyone watching on replay, um, so that you can check out some more stuff on my channel. Of note, I usually try to do that about 24 hours after the live stream. That way it has time to fully process. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you for being here, and